All right, everyone. There's an article link in the description, archived, of course, that's sort of praising lab-grown meat. And at this point, most of the public reaction to the idea of meat grown in a test tube has been negative. There are obvious reasons for this. Why do you need to make an approximation of meat, artificially concocted, using a great deal of energy in the process of making it, by the way, in a lab where contamination can occur. You could have other problems, genetic issues with this particular material using these cell lines. Biopsied flesh is then sort of gelatinized and fed nutrients and rocked around in what they call literally a cradle in order to make sort of a meat slurry, and then it's pressed into shapes like a chicken breast or something like that. Why would you need to do that when you can simply farm meat? Well, what's number one, what's the purpose? Number two, how does the efficiency scale? It's not as efficient as actually just raising animals. They tend to take care of themselves in many cases, game meat anyway, and in other cases are not terribly expensive to actually take care of. For example, there are a lot of people that have a little hutch in the backyard. Maybe they want rabbit meat. Maybe they raise ducks. Maybe they raise chickens. Small game like that, especially fowl or in some cases fish, are not terribly difficult to raise. Like let's say you have a pond. You stock it with fish. You can go fishing anytime that you want to. The fish will reproduce. They'll tend to take care of themselves. They'll eat bugs and shit that land on the water and stuff like that, and little squiggly wiggly things that proliferate in your pond. And overall, there's really not a huge amount of time investment into that. Some people do aquaponics and stuff like that. They'll have tilapia in the bottom layer and stuff like that. And tilapia, it's not the most tasty meat in the world, not the most tasty fish, but it's easy to produce. It's easy to maintain. And so it's a good source of protein. And then you can have your aquaponics up above, and you can raise crops and stuff. I knew a girl once who she and her boyfriend actually had set up such a system, and they were growing a huge amount of food in it, and then they had the tilapia in the bottom actually. They were pescatarians, I believe, so they didn't eat like red meat and stuff like that. But lab-grown meat is a cure looking for a disease, so to speak. It's being marketed partially from the animal rights perspective. Oh my God, how dare you kill animals? We'll just take cells from them and make artificial animal. That still requires an initial animal. You can only replicate the cell line for so long. The efficiency, again, therefore, doesn't scale whatsoever, not with current technology anyway. And it's a pale representation of a product that has been in demand for a very long time. I would point out, every single one of those animals, farmed or unfarmed, will die. Most animals in the wild are torn apart by predators at some point. Or if they die, then their body gets scavenged by vultures or something like that, or crows. It's not a pretty world. People's like pie in the sky dreams of having a world free of death and pain and things like that, that's utopian nonsense. It's never going to happen. If anything, if you achieved it, somebody would get bored and then fuck the whole thing up anyway. It's just human nature. We need chaos in order to actually survive as a species. It's called evolution. Those animals out in the wild, you say it's like when PETA goes in and they'll sabotage a farm and let all the animals loose. What the fuck do you think happens to those animals when they wander off? They die. They get killed by predators. The cows, unmilked, their udders will literally explode. What a wonderful death. You're not accomplishing anything. If anything, you're the ones that are harming the animals. It makes no sense whatsoever. Lab-grown meat, meanwhile, is posited as a plausible way to prevent animal cruelty. But it's not a way to prevent animal cruelty. It's a way to massively drive up the cost of meat while limiting its production significantly, because, there will be a lot less demand when the price doubles because of the efficiency being so much lower. Put people out of business who own large amounts of rural land in order for BlackRock to come in and grab up their farms or something like that. And they'll still do factory farming. It just won't be as free range as before. Farmer John used to have hundreds of chickens, and they wandered around his 15-acre property and ate bugs and shit and kept his garden free of pests. And that was half of what they ate. And they were protected and had a nice fence around them, a nice enclosure, and so forth. Now he just has to slaughter them all because he can no longer, the government has prevented him from selling the meat. What's going to happen when they start making artificial eggs, by the way? That could be lab grown, I'm assuming, too. It wouldn't be particularly difficult. You grow them in little plastic containers that look just like an eggshell or something like that. And then open them up and you've got your egg. Wonderful. Or you could just get a real egg. And thankfully, the egg prices are dropping precipitously at the moment, so that's good news. We'll see where it goes from here. Lab-grown meat also has potential health implications. Because the technology to make lab-grown meat is relatively new, we're not sure the long-term effects that it might have on the human body or on any other animal's body for that matter. So in my opinion, it shouldn't just be regulated. This article's making the argument, well, they shouldn't regulate it so much. They're raising a bunch of investment and you should stay out of the way and let people choose whether they want to eat lab-grown meat. No, no, lab-grown meat should not be commercially available. It should be banned outright. And I say this as somebody who's a libertarian. Why? Because you're possibly going to fuck up the entire population and upend a large chunk of the economy, putting millions of people out of business for absolutely no reason. I can understand the idea of animal rights. I like those posters like, which ones are meat and which ones are pets? And they have all the animals there. And I'm like, technically speaking, all of them are meat, especially in a crisis. Those labs in a real crisis are not going to be producing any meat for you. You're going to need animals. You're going to need to proliferate them. By the way, you're going to be reliant on rural and sub-rural Americans, by the way, to do that. You're not going to be raising a bunch of cows in New York City, although I suppose you could probably do that in Central Park. People would just come butcher the cows and drag the meat off. We've seen instances of this sort of behavior before among urban youths, for instance. Yeah, the Crips are all of a sudden they've got cow cavalry. That would be really funny. And the Bloods they've decided to ride hogs around or something like that. And that would be hysterical. Inner city gang war waged with cavalry. You could see weirder things. We're falling into a dystopian pattern here. We need to reverse course. Lab-grown meat is probably one of the biggest symbols of that dystopian movement. A dystopia in which animal ownership would be, I guess, outlawed, because eventually, if the market becomes large enough for the lab-grown meat, look for governments to start banning people from raising their own animals. Unless it's a factory farm on commercial scale, then it's perfectly fine to abuse the animals all you want. But if you wanted to have some chickens in your backyard or own a cow, that would be outlawed. In some places, they're already moving to do that. That's about all. Peace out.